So then Abram asks for a sign, so how he will know that God is going to fulfill his promise. And God tells him to take these animals that are 3 years old and split them in half, and to take two different types of birds and lay them out. And this is how people came into covenant together, made a promise together, an agreement during that time, and to split them, to cut them in half, and to walk through them. Well, Abraham, God eventually makes Abram fall asleep, and a deep sleep comes over him, and then God tells him the promise, and then God walks through it in smoke and fire. And the interesting thing about that is that Abram didn't have to do a thing. Abram didn't walk through it. This was a covenant that was depending on God alone. Isn't that good? And isn't that a great picture of our covenant with God through Jesus Christ? We get to go to heaven. We get our sins forgiven, and all we have to do is believe. We don't have to do anything. Jesus did it all for us. And that's what the book of Galatians is about. The church that Paul preached the gospel to, the good news that they were saved by grace through faith. These people started to go back into circumcision and the law and these things, and they started to think that they had to earn their salvation, and that's not the case. Just like Abram didn't have to do anything for this covenant, neither do we have to do anything in our covenant with God through Jesus Christ except just believe and accept it. And there's a few things that just seem to speak about Jesus, like the animals being 3 years old. Well, Jesus's ministry was about 3 years, and then him walking through, just reminds me of Jesus being between two thieves who are hanging on a cross. And also the darkness came upon Abram, and so it was when he died on the cross. There was darkness in that area at the time because of it. And then I also want to mention that the promise that he gave Abram, that his descendants would go into slavery for 400 years, ended up being 430, and that they would eventually get out of that slavery, be released from it, and take possessions out of it. And I think that's just a great picture of the church, that the church, we're in a world that we don't think like, right? We don't think the way the world does, because the world primarily operates through the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. And a lot of times it's made to look better, like people are concerned about what other people think, and they come across really friendly, but it can be really prideful underneath. So we're living in a world that we don't agree with. We're not living with the same values. And it can kind of lead to a little bit of oppression, especially if you read the book of Acts, and especially if you see other parts of the world where Christians are really oppressed and persecuted. But that doesn't last, right? We're going to come out of that, and Christ is coming back, and he's actually going to bring us with him. He's going to initiate this 1,000-year reign where God's going to show us how things should have been, and we get to reign with him there. And he's going to make a new heaven and a new earth that we get to be with him forever. And so it's kind of that same way, just as the Israelites were in captivity, in slavery, and then released and taken possessions out of it. So it is we have to go through times of persecution and oppression in this world, but at the same time we are creating for ourselves treasure in heaven. We're bringing possessions out. We're helping other people accept Christ, and we're building the kingdom and bringing out riches. What a great chapter, and full of pictures.